If you needed any more evidence that the UFC does not like UFC featherweight standout Movsar Evloev, look no further than the rumored matchup, which was announced today between Evloev and newcomer Aaron Pico. Of course, Pico, a standout in the Bellator promotion, which is now defunct, obviously, PFL, whatever you want to call it. Red Corner MMA is very legit. If this is coming from them, it's probably going to happen, especially with the Russian fighter here in Movsar Evloev. And my first thought when I saw this fight is just what I mentioned off the top. The UFC does not like Movsar Evloev because I don't think this fight's fair at all to Evloev. I mean, this is a guy who's undefeated. In a perfect world, in a fair world, if we're talking about MMA based off merit, Movsar Evloev should be fighting Alexander Volkanovski this Saturday for the vacant title, not Diego Lopez. The same Diego Lopez who Movsar Evloev defeated 3 fights ago. Now, look, we know why Lopez is getting the shot over Movsar Evloev. Lopez finished his fights. He's been a good company man. Remember the whole Dan Ige situation? Couple hours notice, Lopez is like, all good by me. I'll take the fight. He ends up winning that. And Lopez is a finisher. That's something the UFC really likes. One of the things that has kind of bit Movsar Evloev a little bit throughout his career is that he doesn't finish a lot of fights. Still, though, I don't think that's a reason for him to be fighting a newcomer here in Aaron Pico. I'll talk about Pico a little bit later as far as like, I don't even think he deserves this fight, but I think at the minimum, Evloev should be the backup for this title fight, right? Like they don't have one, is my understanding. I haven't heard that that's the case. Or Evloev should be fighting the winner. That was kind of my assumption. Okay, they're booking this fight, then Evloev can fight the winner, but apparently not. Apparently he's going to be fighting Aaron Pico. So again, I understand why the UFC is going with Lopez. I know a lot of people in the comments will be like, we wanted to see Lopez. Like I get all that. Okay, I'm just saying, like, what more does Evloev need to do? He's been, been defeating a lot of these really good names in the weight class. I mean, you look at some of these wins, especially his last fight. Aljamain Sterling, a former champion, defeats him. That's a huge win. Arnold Allen, I know, was closer, but still Allen, a top guy in the weight class. He's got the win over Lopez, which has aged quite well. Dan Ige, Hakeem Dawodu. I mean, this is a guy that's been in the UFC since 2019, hasn't lost a fight, and can't get a title shot. I mean, he's becoming the Bilal Muhammad or the Magomed Ankalaev of his respective division. I know both those fighters ended up going on to win UFC titles, but they had a lot of roadblocks in the way, and that's kind of what's happening here. Now, let's talk about Aaron Pico. So, Aaron Pico, for those who aren't familiar, obviously a standout wrestler, came over to Bellator as this hype prospect, sort of the future. You got a lot of press. I remember ESPN interviewing, talking about him, and what happened in his Bellator debut didn't go according to plan. Got finished by Zach Freeman in 24 seconds. Absolute disaster. And then after that, won a bunch of fights, but then had some setbacks as well, losing to Henry Corrales, Adam Borex. The point I'm getting at here is that Pico was kind of one of these prospects with Bellator that didn't really pan out. Now, look, he's young enough. He's 28 years old. I'm excited to see him in the UFC. Maybe he can find his second gear in the UFC and have a lot of success. It could certainly happen. And he's exciting. Like, let's be honest here. This guy finishes opponents. He's got good wrestling, but he can also go out there and finish his opponents. But here's the issue. Now, we've had Bellator fighters come over to the UFC and get big fights. We had, obviously, Eddie Alvarez come over to the UFC and fight Donald Cerrone in his debut, right? It wasn't like a number one contender fight, but it was still a very big fight for Alvarez back then. We had Michael Chandler fight Dan Hooker in his UFC debut. He gets the win. Chandler gets the title shot. Now, what do both those guys have in common? Both those fighters were former Bellator champions. I don't think a lot of people remember or they don't know, but Pico never was a Bellator champion. Not even that, Pico never even fought for a featherweight title in Bellator. So this is the part that I have a problem with. Like, I have no issue with Pico coming to the UFC. I think it's going to be great, but he's fighting essentially the number one contender, and I don't think he deserves it. Like at all. Like even Michael Venom Page, similar situation, never was a Bellator champion. He fights Kevin Holland in his debut, right? So it's a little bit different. I mean, if we're going off sort of the trajectory of how Bellator fighters debut in the UFC, that aren't champion, he should be fighting like a Calvin Kattar or something like that. That, and nothing against Kattar, but that's sort of what I thought the UFC was going to do here. Now they're giving him the number one guy. I just don't think that's fair to Evloev. And let's call it like it is. You know what the UFC wants to do, and I'll tell it to you guys, and I've said this before. I did this in the O'Malley video too. The UFC wants Pico to win this fight. They want him to knock him out. I think they're banking on him having a puncher's chance. You look at Pico's last couple fights, right? And again, the competition's not even close. Nothing against Henry Corrales. I think Corrales is close to 40, right? Corrales is 37. Pedro Carvalho. These are not top 15 featherweights in the UFC, in my opinion. But he went out there and finished them. Pico's he's obviously got some knockout power. 9 wins by knockout. He's looked great. That's what the UFC's banking on. And I don't think it's fair to Evloev whatsoever. And to add another wrinkle into this whole thing, and I know people are waiting for me to say it, I'll say it right now. Pico's got the same manager as Movsar Evloev. How on earth is this fair to Movsar Evloev whatsoever? Now, he's got to take the fights he's got to take because he doesn't want to be sidelined. He wants to compete. And it's pretty obvious the UFC's not going to give him either the backup spot for this Saturday or fight the winner. They're like, you got to keep busy. You got to get more wins. So he's got to fight Pico, but it's not fair whatsoever. Again, Pico, not a former champion, not even someone who had a ton of success in Bellator, right? If you look at his wins overall in Bellator, they're against subpar competition here. James Gonzalez, Addy Edwards, who's 9-1. Like Jeremy Kennedy fought and he lost. I know there was a shoulder injury, but Kennedy was looking good prior to that. And Kennedy's a guy that didn't do so well in the UFC either. So, yeah, I just like that. That's the part that bothers me. And then, you know, like as far as the manager being involved, they both have the same manager. I think the UFC went to them and they're like, look, we need Pico to fight someone and so the manager's kind of doing what's best for the UFC, in my opinion. I think the manager is kind of, and you know who I'm talking about. I don't need to say his name on here, but I think he's trying to do the UFC a favor here. They're trying to give Pico a fast track to a title shot. Meanwhile, they're basically screwing over Movsar Evloev. Like, he shouldn't be fighting Aaron Pico. I'm sorry. I'd feel better if he was fighting like a Brian Ortega or someone that at least has been at the top of the UFC's featherweight division. Pico hasn't done any of that. So that's again, like and the interesting part is Evloev switched management last year. You know, he had a very good manager in Dana Rubenstein, who I think was steering him in the right direction. It almost seems like things have gotten worse, right? Like he fights Aljamain Sterling. You think, okay, now he's got to get the title shot. Evloev, that is. He beats him. Great fight. Like I don't think it was a boring fight whatsoever. That doesn't even get him a title shot. It's crazy to me, man. So yeah, again, Movsar Evloev is now the new Bilal Muhammad and Magomed Ankalaev. As far as a quick pick on this one, might as well give it to you now as we're looking at the tail of the tape. Evloev should win this. I know Pico's got great wrestling. I know Pico has the ability to knock him out, but Pico hasn't fought anyone close to Movsar Evloev. Evloev should win this. I think there's a case for Evloev being the best featherweight in the world right now, and we'll have to see if he ever gets that opportunity, but you got to think he wins this and probably wins a decision and probably doesn't finish Aaron Pico. So we'll see what happens. Again, not 100% confirmed, but man, when I saw this, my first thought, like a lot of people's, is the UFC must really hate Movsar Evloev. Not a good look there with him getting kind of screwed over like this a little bit, right? So I'll definitely do an early look preview on this fight. Certainly going to be interesting. The May 17th, I believe, is a fight night card. I don't know. Yeah, it looks like, oh my gosh, I think this is an Apex card. Yeah, it looks like it's in Las Vegas. And it's at the Apex. Yeah, congratulations. You beat Aljamain Sterling. We're going to put you in the Apex against this newcomer who wasn't even a Bellator champion. Like, that's the thing that drives me nuts about this. Like, if this was if it was a situation, like even like an AJ McKee coming over, at least you could say AJ McKee was a Bellator champion. Pico never even reached that. Right? He's been fighting subpar competition. And then when he would get that step up, it didn't go his way. So, and I hate to say it, Evloev's probably not going to finish Pico because he doesn't have a lot of knockout power, right? I don't think that's the kryptonite of Aaron Pico. He fights like a Josh Emmett. You know, granted, Emmett lost last night, but you see where I'm going with this. If he fights a power puncher, I think Pico's in a lot of trouble because a lot of his skill set goes out the window because he can be knocked out. He's just taken a lot of damage already in his career. So, yeah. My take on this, just to summarize here, the UFC doesn't like Evloev. They like Aaron Pico. They want Pico to knock out Movsar Evloev. Then they can fast track him to a title shot. And don't be surprised if Pico wins this. If he does get the title shot, if he does get the winner of Alex Volkanovski and Diego Lopez, that could certainly happen. We'll see what happens and how things take place. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you agree with me here? Like, again, I know there's people that don't like Movsar Evloev, but you have to look at the fact he's undefeated. Hasn't lost a fight in the UFC. He's beating good opposition, and now he's having to fight this guy when you can clearly see the UFC wants the other guy to win. So I feel bad for the guy. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.